On today's episode, we talk to Father Nathan Castle. He is a priest, a author, and a podcaster. He talks about how to help souls navigate through the afterlife to heaven.
He sure did, Nick. So you need to listen in because this is something that's out of this world.
Let's talk about death, baby. Let's talk about grief and mourning. Is it argumental or existential? What's it mean to me? Let's talk about death.
Hi, I'm Benny Cabal, and I'm a funeral professional.
And I'm Nicholas Cabal, a psychologist.
Hey, Nick, let's talk about death.
Let's do it.
All right, Dr. Nick. Today we have an awesome guest, Father Nathan Castle. Basically, if from our understanding, you help souls that seem to be trapped, don't really know where to go, and you help them through your dreams, right? Or am I way
That's
off
part of
target
it.
here?
That's part of it. The longer I've done this, I discovered that the ones that I deal with all died violently and suddenly. And I've been doing this about 25 years, and they come to me in the night. They show me in a dream what happened to them. And at first I thought they were all stuck because of trauma, but some of them aren't really that. They just needed extra help in the afterlife, and they weren't really ready for the grand adventure of it. They really needed to do some healing before they went on to whatever fun they might go on to.
When you say healing, what can you go a little bit more in depth with what you mean by healing?
As I mentioned, all of the people that come to me and to my prayer partners died traumatically. So car accidents, shootings, stabbings, drownings, suicides, all of them left the body in some sort of agitated state, or sudden thing, and they need a chance to just kind of chill, sort of get their bearings, and they're not left alone to do that. There apparently is something, how here there's an organized system to handle these kind of things. There are people that are in ambulances. You guys have worked in the funeral industry, so you're one piece of a continuum of what happens when people die. But even if they don't, if they're in a traumatic accident, there's somebody that knows how to deal with getting you out of a car or getting you in an ambulance. There's people who are medical professionals who know how to get you to take care of you while you're en route. And then there's a ER or a surgery, or there's a step. And then I think my team and I are like the discharge staff when you've healed enough that you don't need the hospital anymore. But somebody makes sure that you understand your meds, when your physical therapy is, who's coming to get you, are you going to be well fed? We kind of help people out the door.
Do you have any idea why it's only traumatic souls that come to you?
Well, let me back up a little bit, because we sometimes do get people that died peacefully in their sleep, but only if they had a trauma that made them kind of feel like they died before they died. Sometimes people keep living, although they feel like they kind of died inside. So I sometimes get ones like that, but really not very often.
Once you have this chill time with them, do they tend to move on? Are they comfortable with moving on, or are they still kind of in this stuck state?
Yeah, I usually use the word vetted. They don't show up to me randomly. They've been vetted, and there are people that have been assisting them who say, "You're ready for this." Sometimes I used to ask early on, "How did you find me?" And so I got so used to hearing, "I don't know, somebody brought me here." That was one of them.
Do they come to you right at the time of death, or do you see
No.
this time obviously not exist? So is this
No,
person...
well, actually, for some of them, that was something that I thought that time wouldn't exist, but it does for some. It just depends. Do you know anybody that never knows what time it is?
Yes. Yes.
Do you have anybody that you might make a dinner reservation with, and they're not going to be there on time, or they're not going to know what day it is? There are people like that in the afterlife, that some of them pay very close attention to time on Earth, mostly because of their loved ones. They want to hang around and keep tabs on somebody they love, and so they pay more attention to time on Earth. And then others don't pay it any attention at all.
Have you dealt with a traumatic death yourself? Would that be why they're attracted to you, or do you think it's just your spiritual connection?
No, I haven't had a loss that suddenly. I haven't experienced that. The way that I explain that is when I was a really little kid, I grew up in a Catholic home where I was taught spiritual practices really early. And both of my dad's sisters were Dominican nuns. I'm a Dominican. And they were both Dominican first grade teachers. So they knew how to catechize little kids. And then my mom was a great teacher of the faith. And they taught me that I had a family on earth and a family in heaven. And at night, we talked to our heavenly family, and here's how we do it. And I was sending blessings all over the universe as a 3-year-old. And and then when I learned about what happened, that people die and what happens when they die, well, we were told that most people go to purgatory. Most people need a chance to clean up a bit or do something in order to be in the presence of God, for all eternity, and that you could help them go faster if you prayed for them. And one of my aunts said, she took me aside right before my first communion in the first grade and said, I need you to listen very carefully. God loves everybody and hears everybody's prayers, but the prayers of little children go straight to God's heart. You have a superpower while you're a child, and you won't be a child for very long. So don't waste your short childhood. Pray for everybody and everything you can think of. And so I had heard the Gospels about the last being first, and kind of the upside down nature of the kingdom of God, where weakness is strength and so on. And I just thought that made sense. And so, okay, if that's the case, then I took that to heart. And every night I was praying for what I call the souls in line at the bank. You know how when you go to a bank in the lobby, it's obvious that they plan to make you wait?
Yeah.
And they have
Absolutely.
those zigzaggedy rope things that make you, stand in line and wait your turn. I just thought purgatory must be like that. And that I was also told that if yours was the prayer that sprung somebody into purgatory, it was kind of imagined like an international border. So if you were aggravatingly close, you're right on the border, but you need one more prayer. And so I would pray for the person that needed one more prayer because I thought they would be the low-hanging fruit, and I was told you'd have a friend for all eternity if yours was the prayer that got this person into heaven. So I was real busy with that. I wanted to see that purgatory had prompt customer service. If I could do anything about it, you're not going to stay there very long.
Let me ask you this, Father. When did this gift, if you will, start for you? When did you notice it?
And the first time when I was 7, and then in a big way in my early 40s. It had different manifestations. There were some of it that was in my early 20s, but the first time that I ever prayed for somebody and could see them was when I was 7.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I really like what you said there about children. I really do feel like children do have extra powers when it comes to the spiritual world. And
I do too.
I mean, Jesus said, "What we only way we can go into heaven is to be childlike to begin
Yes.
with." Okay, my question when it comes to these souls is: did you ever have a soul that you didn't know how to help?
No, it's really easy. They're all vetted. They're brought to me. Nobody has to have their arm twisted or anything like that. They're all ready to do this thing, and they even know because we've been at it for so long. Their guardian angels are always with them. That's Catholic lingo. Other people might say their guide, their spirit guide, their higher self, or whatever. But I just use guardian angel because I think it works. And their guardians bring them to me when it's timely, when they don't need, when they're not going to object. And they know that one of the questions that we often ask is, can you think of anyone who died before you did, who loved you, that you would like to have greet you? And so they all almost always come with that. It used to be that I had to ask them on the spot and they had to think about it. But now it seems they almost all have been prepped in advance and have been asked that question, who would you like to have greet you?
So you almost have a script when they come to you, almost
Yeah,
in your
sort of.
own. Now, let's say somebody is worried about somebody who died traumatically. Is the idea just like pray for them as much as you can, and that helps their guardian angel get them to somebody if they need that? I'm gonna assume, just like everything else, not all traumatic deaths have to go through the vetted system by
Exactly.
any means, form, or shape.
I don't assume that everybody that dies of a trauma today is in this line. I think it's just for those that need it. And I get a fair amount of traffic through my website particularly parents who lose a child either to an overdose or a suicide. Very often they feel in addition to their normal grieving, they feel responsible somehow for their kids' afterlife. And that's a big burden. So I was dealing with one of those today and just said, just let that thought go. You're not in charge of what's beyond your control. That would just be cruel. God did not create that universe. Um, so try to be gentle with yourself and don't feel like you're responsible. But I believe that anybody from any religious tradition or none at all who can form a thought in their heart that's true and passionate can be heard. You don't have to have a formula to say a prayer. Your heart can communicate to your loved one, and I believe they can hear you. So I just coach people that way. Just talk to your son. Forgive them anything in case they feel guilty, for hurting you by leaving the way they did. If you can bring yourself to do that, just say, "Hey, you must have a lot going on. Consider me off the checklist. You and I are good." And then you can continue to pray for them and for whatever their growth is, whatever their next thing is. Christmas is coming. Do you ever give gift cards?
Absolutely.
Do you chase people around and ask them what they spent it on?
Absolutely not.
Probably not. I think of intercessory prayer for people that have died as like giving them a gift card. I just want them to have energy and possibility that didn't exist before I sent my love to them in the form of a prayer. And what they do with it, maybe I'll find that out in the big roundup. After I died, maybe that's be part of what I want to do, is chase people down and say, "Hey, what did you do afterwards?" And you must have been at a lot of funerals. You heard a lot of eulogies.
Oh yeah.
You hear people that say, "Well, he's up there now bowling with his friends," or he's at the Packers game or whatever. My Houston Astros just won the World Series, and I invited my mom and my dad and my aunt and my best friend from college to come sit by me. All of them, they're all in the skyboxes, but I asked them to come sit by me to enjoy the game. Whatever, I really do believe that the afterlife is full of learning and adventures of different kinds, but sometimes that needs to be preceded by some healing from how they left here.
In your experience, is it normally like a one night session with all these people, or is it multiple nights?
I schedule. I keep a journal on my nightstand just in case. I get one of these about once a week, and so if one occurs in the night, I wake up from it and I try to write it down as fast as I can so I don't lose the detail. And then I have different prayer partners, and the pandemic, made it impossible to be together without killing each other. And so we started doing a lot of it on Zoom. And so I have people that live in different parts of the country, and we just make appointments with each other. I have one on Saturday with a dentist in Buffalo and a psychiatrist in LA. And the three of us meet every other Saturday, and we do 2 crossings. We call them crossings. We do 2 crossings in 2 hours.
How do those two help with the crossing?
We first go into what I call protected prayer. And because I'm Roman Catholic, that takes the form of, making the sign of the cross. I call on St. Michael the Archangel, first of all. And I imagine something like a huddle or a bubble, something where we're creating a space in which we're safe from any distraction or any dark energy, dark spirit. I always call on Mary, the mother of Jesus. Jesus is embedded in the sign of the cross, so he's already there. And then St. Dominic, and I usually ask my mom and dad to be there. A whole bunch of different ones. I have a whole bunch of friends in high places. But we don't pick up hitchhikers, so I'm not just going to throw my spirit out into the ether and see who's there. But anyway, we do protected prayer first, and then for my partners, I read the dream story, and we read it once for the mind and once for the heart. Have you ever heard of Lectio Divina? Do you know that phrase? Lectio.
No.
It's a method of contemplative prayer using scripture, like just some little nugget of scripture, a few lines, and you read it once just for the content, and then you sit still and then another voice reads it kind of for your imagination or your emotions.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense.
So we do that, and in the course of doing the second part of it, I'll say we're receptive now to the person who brought this story. I'm Nathan. I'm the one you brought it to. If you'd like to borrow my voice to tell us more about yourself and how we can help you today, it's available for your use. I don't call that channeling because in the Catholic Church, it's a radioactive word. It upsets people. And I believe it belongs to what St. Paul in the Christian scriptures called the gift of prophecy, allowing God or somebody in the heart of God to speak through the prophet's voice. So when I'm doing that, I believe it's a prophetic gift. And oftentimes I'll ask their guardian, would you mind, we did a mic test before this show began.
Right.
And we do something like a mic test, many times these people have never borrowed somebody else's voice, so it's new. So I asked their guardian, would you come on and just give us a little clarity and show the one in your care how it works? Sometimes in the dream, I might have had a dream that I was driving a car that went off the road and rolled over. But in the dream, I didn't know whether I was male or female. And so
okay.
Sometimes I'll say, could you give us some clarity about gender? Here's what I got. Sometimes I'll get a feeling that I'm not in the U.S., but most of the time I am. And so I'd like to know if I'm in another country. And sometimes there's a crowd scene, and I'm not sure exactly who we're helping. You know how sometimes a movie will begin with a crowd scene, and you as the viewer don't yet know who we're supposed to care about?
Right.
But as it unfolds for the next minute or two, it zeroes in on somebody in the crowd, and you know that this is their story. Sometimes I need to know, and sometimes we'll help more than one person at a time. So I like to know, are we helping one person today, or are we helping a group? So the guardians will come on, and they can be really cool. The guardian angels, they're all persons. They've never been human, but they have their own personalities. And some of them are very matter of fact and businesslike. Others are pretty chill and funny. They often will pick sort of a handle or a nickname that we call them by while we're working with them. And then they turn it over to the person that they assist, and then we go from there.
Do you ever have any of these souls come back to you and thank you?
No, I don't tell any of their stories publicly unless I've gotten their permission to use their story. So I go back to them one more time just to get their permission. And I thought when we were first doing that it would be a very brief conversation because it's a yes or no question. You could answer it in one word. But most of the time they give us a little update of what they did after our session and what they've been up to since, which is kind of fun. But other than that, once in a while I've had somebody come back to assist someone else.
Ooh, okay.
Interesting. That's really cool.
One guy accidentally, he was in the early 50s in upstate New York. He was on a double date, and he accidentally drove his grandmother's borrowed car off the end of the pier and killed himself and the 3 other people in the car. And we called him, he was stuck in an afterlife guilt trip that he had read. He had just graduated high school, and he had read The Scarlet Letter. Did you have to read The Scarlet Letter in high school?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
You remember Hester Prynne, the woman with the big A? Well, he decided that he was -4 because he robbed the earth of 4 people, including himself. And so he was wearing, instead of a Scarlet Letter, he was wearing a -4. And so we called him Paul -4 Man. And the guy that helped in that one was a friend of mine who had never done it before, but he had this insight. He said, you're not -4 because the other ones seem like they all crossed from what you've said. You're the one that stayed back. It looks like you're really -1. And then, do you remember high school algebra?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, gosh, yes.
Do you remember how the equal sign is in the middle and something's on one side and something's on the other, and you need to get the crossover? So -1 +1, you add +1 to the other side, and then it equals out. he said, you know, what we really need to do is get you to the other side of the equal sign. The equal sign is the is
Right.
the
Right,
dash from
right.
here to there. And honest to God, when the guy said, I never thought of that. I loved algebra. I never thought algebra would help me cross. And so he said, well, let's say a prayer and see how this goes. And he said, oh my God, it's Mr. Weisenheimer or whatever the guy's. It was his school principal
Oh,
showed up,
wow.
and he was holding a football jersey that was purple and gold and had a 1 on it. And he
That's
was
awesome.
saying, here, put this on, then you'll be +1. And he put on a football jersey from his school and crossed over.
It's wonderful. Now, when they cross over, do you get a glimpse of heaven?
I wouldn't say that. It's joyful because for the guardians and the care team that's been helping them for what could be years in clock time, they know it's like graduation day. So there's
Okay.
the same kind of joy that family and friends have for graduation day.
Do you feel them? Are you like in control of your body, or are you like in the back of your head and they're kind of like using your body?
I call it being co-conscious. I'm never entranced, and I always they borrow my language, but they have to use what I have available. And sometimes they'll use a turn of a phrase of mine, and they'll say, "I've never used that word before, but it works."
Do you see their guardians? Do you see them? Do they manifest themselves too, or do you mostly just see the individual that's trying?
No, I don't really see them. I feel them, and they make me know things. You know how, imagine yourself going to pick up somebody at the airport,
Okay.
and especially somebody you love and haven't seen in a long time. You're
Yep.
scanning all these people, and then suddenly there's recognition. Something went from your eyeball. You know how in our eyes, we're actually seeing an upside down version of whatever our eyes saw, and then the optic nerve delivers it to the brain, and somehow there's some place in the brain that goes, oh, it's you. There's some sort of place of knowing that goes from raw data to knowing, and it seems like they can find the knowing part of me and just make me know stuff without necessarily having a lot of sense data.
Father, you talk a lot about how you've helped them. My question is, and this is the psychologist in me, I'm just curious, how have they helped you?
I've been at this about 25 years. One of the things is they consistently talk about the fact that they needed to learn the truth of things, and that sometimes that was difficult. You know, a lot of times people think of judgment, and especially Christian people can be taught that Jesus is going to judge them, and so they're afraid or disinterested or whatever. But if you think of what happens in a courtroom, courtrooms exist to get to the truth of things. Sometimes people think of courtrooms as just being a place where we mete out punishment to wrongdoers. That's one way to think of it. But at a basic level, we're just trying to find out what really happened. And so people will go through a process of learning the truth of their lives, and anywhere that they distorted something into something that was overblown, like poor Paul, who was so guilty about killing everybody. All he did was make a driving mistake. Do you really have to punish yourself for all eternity for that? It was his own self-condemnation that was his problem, but he had to come to the truth of that. He had to learn that. So it seeing that really a life well lived is just about learning the truth of your life. And you don't need to wait to die to do that. You can just take a humble heart and listen to people around you and grow and be happier and more peaceful. That's affected me. And then all of these deaths are so awful, but the afterlife story is so sweet that now anymore when I hear of calamities and different things, or catastrophes among people I love, of course it's painful and stuff, but I just know it's really true that Good Friday turns into Easter morning. It's just really true.
Always something better at the end.
Yes. We have to take part. There's nothing automatic about it. And some people move very slowly because that's what they choose. And others want to race ahead if that's what they choose. And their team on the other side always respects their autonomy. Nobody's forced to do what they don't want to do.
Kind of going back, you said this kind of started at an early age. I can imagine as a very young person that dealing with traumatic death was probably traumatic to you. Would you say that, or no? Or somehow you had already a shell to protect yourself from that?
Well, this gets into a whole other discussion, but the first time that I experienced it was the Kennedy assassination. I was 7
Interesting.
years old when that happened, and he was on the wall of our Catholic school next to Jesus and the Pope. And I was a Texan and a Catholic, and that happened, in Texas. And the nuns in our school were just so smitten with him. He was the until Biden, he was the only Catholic president there'd ever been, and
Mhm.
his murder and everything that followed it made a big impression on me. And I already had that well-developed habit of praying for people that had died. We were praying. Did you know that earlier that year, a few months earlier, they had lost a baby?
Yes, that's right. They did. They did.
In August, they had a little child named Patrick who only lived a couple of days. And we were all involved in praying for baby Patrick, and then he died. And then, several months later, his father was killed. And his two children had birthdays that week. Can you imagine that?
Cannot imagine that birthday party.
Well,
by
I,
any means.
as a kid, I thought, well, how do they even do that? Both of their children had birthdays within a week of his murder. Anyway, I prayed for him the night. I remember watching the funeral, and Catholics were hardly ever depicted on television in the early '60s. All those shows like Leave It to Beaver, or all of those sitcoms. If there was ever mention of a church, it was generic Protestant. Catholics never showed up. And there was a mass on TV, and I'd never seen that before. It was a funeral mass. And then there was the horse that had no rider. It was very evocative stuff. And as a little kid, I was paying attention. And then when they got to the graveside and there was a eternal flame, I just thought, how in the world can they guarantee a flame doesn't go out? And it must be that they want everybody to know that his body died, but the rest of him is still alive. And so anyway, that night, our school principal had run into our classroom telling us to pray for the president, and then they sent us all home early, and he was dead, before I got home. But I hadn't prayed for him, and after the funeral that night, we were going to go to school the next morning. I thought, what's the matter with you? You haven't even prayed for the president. You pray for dead people all the time, and you haven't even prayed for the president. So I did, and when I did, I could see him, and he could see me.
Wow.
And I knew he wanted to be alone, and I could feel his heart, and he wasn't angry. He felt colossally sad because he felt he'd disappointed everybody.
Oh, wow. What an interesting. Did you know the interesting fact about JFK's funeral? He was the first closed casket, and that's why all presidents from that day have been all closed caskets.
No, I didn't know that.
That's exactly. He was the first president that was a closed casket. That's what
Both
they do then.
Jacqueline are both, history buffs, and both of them were very well read about history. And she immediately, there were all these connections with Lincoln. Do you know that?
Yep. Oh, with the railroad, like the death of you talk about the murder itself.
Well, they were both elected in 1860 and 1960, and they were both shot and in the head, and he was riding in a Lincoln Continental.
Yeah, all that. Yeah,
there were all these Lincoln things, and so she borrowed from she put people to work on studying Lincoln's funeral and tried to pattern his after that. She just thought it had a grandeur and a healing quality at that awful moment in American history, and she wanted something similar for this. Anyway, it was even though I was 7 years old, I'm 66 now. That was as real as could be, and it changed me. I just thought, oh, okay, these people can hear me and see me,
It's a wonderful story, and I wish we could keep talking about this for ages, Father. So I really appreciate your time. I just want to say thank you, Father Nathan Castle, for doing this. Thank you for everything that you're doing, helping these souls. Thank you for the books you've written. This awesome podcast. Check it out if you haven't. The Joyful Friar. And if there's anybody, if there's a way to, is there a way to get a hold of you if somebody wants to see your books or to have any
Yeah.
conversation with you?
The easiest way is just my website. It's my name, Nathan, Nathan -Castle, Castle. So nathan-castle.com. If you go on the website to the contact, button, when you hit the contact thing, it gives a form. I need to know what time zone you live in, for one thing, and I ask that people not ask me questions that are answered in the book if they haven't read the book.
Oh,
There just
Good.
aren't enough hours in the day for me to explain it over and over again. I just say, if you want to ask me a question that you heard on a podcast about this process, first read at least the first book. And the books are available in book form, in ebook form, and in audiobook form. And I and my prayer partners read the audiobook. So we try to give you a kind of fly on the wall experience of what it would have been like to have been present to that. But I ask that people don't ask me questions that I've already answered. And then I just say to them, I'd love to talk with you. Let me know when you've read book one. And then I'll set up a Zoom call. I use the word stuck soul in the subtitle of the first book. And so I use that as a way of saying, I think I'm the tow truck driver. I will help you out of the ditch, but I won't follow you down the road. That is, I'll have one appointment with you to see if I can kind of get you started in a healing direction, and then it's on you to find the next person who can, help you finish what you got to do.
That's wonderful. Well, yet again, thank you, Father Nathan Castle, for taking time out of your busy schedule. And if any of you listeners out there want to leave us a message or have a thought on this episode, please get a hold of us at letstalkaboutdeathpod@gmail.com. Please like us, subscribe, send it out to anybody who's dealing with grief. I'm sure they can get something out of this episode and many more episodes. And if you are not talking about death,
You aren't living.
thank you. Have a great night.